जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभ जय गिरिवरधारी जय गिरिवरधारी जय यशोदनंदन जय ब्रज जन रंजना जय यशोदनंदन जय ब्रज जन रंजना जय यमुना तीरवनाचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय यमुना तीरवनाचारी जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव जय कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे जय राधा माधव राधा माधव राधे जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय प्रभुपाद श्री श्री राधा माधव की जय शील प्रभुपाद की जय गौर भक्त वृंद की जय Welcome everyone. So today it's chapter 14 and I'll just first of all share our initial prayers that we read. So you can chant along. Om Jnanam Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamhayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangsha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitangsha He Krishna Karuna Sindho Deenabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanusute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyasya Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So last time we completed the 5 most potent items of devotional service, and Srila Rupa Goswami's expansion and Srila Prabhupada's explanation of these 5 most potent items of devotional service. Today in chapter 14 completes the discussion on these 64 items of devotional service. It further elaborates, just to, in case we had any doubt, it further elaborates the 5 most potent items of devotional service. And it also identifies what is not part of this list of 64 items of devotional service. So it also tells us that, look, these are the things that we must not identify as the angas of bhakti. So oftentimes people think, oh, this is bhakti, but they wrongly identify that. Srila Rupa Goswami continues to explain why certain items commonly thought to be angas of bhakti cannot be accepted as such. Are other spiritual practices bhakti or support for bhakti? So this is a question that we may also face in our day-to-day preaching, in our day-to-day lives, because, many times people say, well, is this also, but just yesterday, someone in a program was saying, well, we say the Guru Granth mantra, is that also equal to the Maha Mantra? Is that also bhakti? So we get these questions and we wonder what is in the purview of bhakti and what is not. Sadhana bhakti awakens love of Godhead by fixing one's mind on Krishna. However, neither jnana, cultivation of knowledge, nor vairagya, cultivation of detachment, fix the mind on Krishna. So jnana and vairagya, both things that we think are, very essential, and they are essential in our spiritual practice. Both things are not central to bhakti. They don't directly help us fix the mind on Krishna. Knowledge and detachment, these two things, jnana and vairagya, Krishna speaks about them in the Bhagavad Gita. But here it said, in jnana, one fixes the mind on discriminating between matter and spirit, not on Krishna. In vairagya, the mind fixes itself on the object to be rejected, not on Krishna. Therefore, neither jnana nor vairagya is a practice of sadhana bhakti. Wow, right? So although we read chapter 2, and it's Krishna's words, and reading Bhagavad Gita is sadhana bhakti, but just that knowledge by itself is not sadhana bhakti, because that knowledge by itself does not fix the mind on Krishna. Even Greek philosophers talked about the difference between the body and the soul. So that's good. It is can be a catalyst towards spiritual life. It can be a foundation by which we develop our spiritual life, our love for Krishna. But in of themselves, they are not love for Krishna. Renunciation also. I mean, renunciation is so hard. And even the great yogis, they renounce the world. But just by renouncing, they don't become devotees of Krishna. There's a very wonderful pastime into the Chaitanya Charitamrita, how there's this one Brahman who would only drink milk. He's a very austere Brahman. Imagine, just you don't eat anything, drink, just only who is drinking milk. And he wanted to see the dancing of Lord Chaitanya. And so the devotees brought him in the confidential association of Lord Chaitanya, where Lord Chaitanya would do these kirtans and Shiva's Angan, and they were very intimate pastimes, very deep pastimes of the Lord. So unlike his Sankirtan on the streets, everyone was not invited to these sanghas. And Lord Chaitanya would only exhibit these things, would only exhibit his ecstatic love in front of devotees who were qualified to see it. So this Brahman, I think it was Srivas Thakur, he got affection towards him and he hid him in the closet and he said, you can just sit here and listen and peek through this. Lord Chaitanya will not know. And if he knows, then, it may be of trouble. So you just stay here. So Lord Chaitanya began to chant and dance, and then he stopped in the middle and he said, today I'm not feeling that ecstasy. Someone is here who is not supposed to be here. Who is here? And so the devotees became very afraid. They knew that the Brahman is hiding there. And so they pull him out and they bring him. Lord Chaitanya, this very pure Brahmana is here. And he only drinks milk. And then Lord Chaitanya responds. He says, do you think that just by drinking milk, you can get love for Krishna? He says, do you think that by just drinking milk, you can get love for Krishna? And that was the end of it. They understood the point. He said, even the monkeys just drink milk. So Vairagya is something very good, but Vairagya by itself does not lead us to Krishna. That's why my Bhakti Shastri teacher, he used to say that renunciation is a result of purification. It's not the means of purification. When we fix our mind on Krishna, then we become purified. And we naturally are able to renounce the world. Or when we fix our mind on Krishna and make the effort to renounce, then we become purified. But it's not the means of purification alone. And this is why we should not strive for Jnana and Vairagya separately. This is why we say first chant, and then naturally we'll be able to follow the regulated principles. The focus is the chanting. We try to focus on the chanting when we preach to others, because by chanting, then naturally they get Jnana and Vairagya. They get this knowledge and they get this detachment. Also, aversion to something can be another form of attachment. So Arjun, he's not detached because first he was attached to fighting, and then he was attached to not fighting. Aversion to something is also an attachment. He was attached not to fight. And Krishna tells him, no, give up all attachment. Do it for me. So your so-called renunciation of wanting to sacrifice the kingdom, go to the forest, is actually a form of attachment. So Vairagya, so-called Vairagya, can also be a form of attachment. Therefore, neither Jnana nor Vairagya is a practice of sadhana bhakti. Jnana and Vairagya can support bhakti. Knowledge and renunciation can initially help a devotee withdraw his mind from the whirlpool of sense gratification. Thus, they can sometimes support bhakti, although they are not integral aspects of pure devotional service. A lot of people who come to Krishna consciousness, they come because they have some very painful experience in material life. And that painful experience creates a sense of detachment. And due to that detachment, they become attached to spiritual life. I was just talking to a man yesterday, and he lost his nephew when he was 9 months old. His nephew died, and he couldn't make sense of it. Then he lost his father. Then he lost, he had in the past 2 or 3 years suffered 2 deaths. And he said, I couldn't make sense of life. And that's when I started reading the Bhagavad Gita. And now he's coming to the classes and he's very serious. So knowledge and renunciation are very good because they become catalysts for bhakti. And even while we practice bhakti, even after we're a devotee, by being renounced, we can make spiritual progress very quickly. Like Raghunath Das Goswami, his renunciation pleased Lord Chaitanya so much. So on one hand, this Brahman, Lord Chaitanya was not impressed. He said, you cannot attain Krishna just by drinking milk. He was saying you have to engage in the process of devotional service. But on the other hand, Lord Chaitanya was so pleased by the renunciation of Raghunath Das Goswami. He was most pleased by his renunciation. He said renunciation is the ornament of a devotee. So they support bhakti, but still they're not the essence of bhakti. Chapter 2 is very special to us because it's spoken by Krishna and we're connected to Krishna in this way. But by itself, chapter 2 is just, mental speculation. The speculators also, by itself, not chapter 2, but the philosophy of the soul, the speculators also talk about the soul and body and are sometimes, the academics, they have very simple lives, materially speaking, but they're very attached to their mental wranglings. Some scholars recommend that knowledge and renunciation are important factors for elevating oneself to devotional service. But actually, that is not a fact. Actually, the cultivation of knowledge or renunciation, which are favorable for achieving a footing in Krishna consciousness, may be accepted in the beginning, but ultimately they may also come to be rejected. For devotional service is dependent on nothing other than the sentiment or desire for such service. It requires nothing more than sincerity. So Prabhupada here is saying that even detachment and renunciation may be rejected. So the example that's given is that Krishna says we have to break out of this tree of mature life, this banyan tree of mature life, with the strong acts of detachment. So we use that strong acts of detachment and knowledge to break out of this mature world. But then once we have cut the entangling bonds of attachment, then we throw away that axe. We use the axe to get up, but then we throw it away. Like the gopis, they're not interested in detachment or knowledge. They're simply interested in love for Krishna. But then we see the devotees are so renounced, again, like Raghunath Das Goswami, they're so detached. But their detachment is the result of service. They're so much absorbed in Krishna's service. They have no time for mature life. They have no interest in eating. They are, it's not a endeavor in of itself. Because it's relevant to bhakti, therefore they're doing it. So it's part of their service. If it's not part of their service, they're not particularly passionate about this. Just like we have pure devotees like Pundarik Vidyanidhi. He was living in gluttony. He was a great king or a great minister, something like that. But he was not renouncing it because it was not in conflict with his service. Those of us who are sadhakas, we need to externally renounce because we're not on that liberated platform. Because Prabhupada is just saying in the beginning, it's necessary. But on the highest stages of devotion, it's only important in relation to the service that one does. One point I wanted to say here, I was forgetting. This is why we have to engage in the positive aspect of devotional service. Krishna says in the Gita, right, that real detachment is experiencing a higher taste. Then naturally you give up the lower taste. So it's the positive aspect of devotional service that's very important, that we focus on. And that is true detachment. As explained in chapter 5, bhakti is completely independent and self-sufficient. There's no need to practice jnana and vairagya to achieve detachment, because detachment automatically follows. If the heart is full of desires to serve Krishna, there's no room for material desires. That is the point. We see actually that sometimes devotees who cultivate a lot of knowledge, even though they're absorbed in study and shastra, they sometimes fall down. Or they're not very spiritually inspired. Like Prabhupada wanted us to do scientific preaching, academic preaching. But sometimes we see that in doing scientific preaching and academic preaching, the devotees, they become spiritually weak and all these things. Because this is the point, that it's not, unless we are centered and we remember that I'm doing this for Krishna and we connected with Krishna, it can very easily turn into speculation, into mental speculation. This is why Prabhupada says that knowledge without devotion is mental speculation, and devotion without knowledge is sentimentalism. So if we focus too much on the knowledge part or the renunciation part, we can actually become spiritually weak. Also on the renunciation, I knew one devotee who was very austere. He used to eat very little. And when he would come in front of my Guru Maharaj, then I used to think this is such an advanced devotee. And my Guru Maharaj, I still think, but the impression was, oh, he was super thin, would eat very little. And my Guru Maharaj would say, you don't eat anything? Are you taking prasad or not? And he responded in this way, and I was surprised. I was thinking he'll be so happy. This devotee is living so austerely. And he was happy by the austerity, but this person became so focused on his detachment part, minimizing eating, minimizing this, sleeping, very little, which is very good. Again, the Goswamis, devotees, we try to reduce our sleeping, but he became so focused on the whole austerity thing that he was actually not doing a lot of service. It was just all about his austerity. It was all just about his renunciation. So the focus in Jnana and Vairagya can often become towards us. It's all about me, my knowledge, and my renunciation. Whereas in spiritual life, it's Krishna in the center. As soon as there's anything in the center other than Krishna, then it's not bhakti. So it's Krishna in the center, and everything else is in service of that. Sorry. Jnana and Vairagya can also harm bhakti. In bhakti, one pleases the Lord by one's love for him. Expressions of such love requires a soft heart, easily moved by emotions. A soft heart, easily moved by emotions. The paths of knowledge and renunciation, however, train one to develop a stoic heart, unmoved by emotions, for emotions tend to push one into sense gratification. Thus, the processes of jnana and vairagya can impede devotional service. So in the Bhagavatam, what is an example? Who is an example of how jnana and vairagya can impede devotional service? And in that same example, there's also a devotee who's very soft-hearted and shows that how love requires a soft heart.
Uddhavji, Prabhuji, and his interaction with the gopis.
Very nice example, actually. That Uddhava at that time was very fixed in knowledge and renunciation. And he went to Vrindavan and he was telling them, think about Brahman, become renounced of your attachment with Krishna. But he realized that was his lack of Krishna consciousness, and their heart was so soft. It was in love with Krishna. Okay, that's a great example. Another example? Someone else?
Maybe Dhruv Maharaj?
Later on, he becomes very soft-hearted. Yeah. But the example of Durvasa Muni and Ambarish Maharaj. Right? Durvasa Muni was such a great sage, but due to his austerity, he became very hard-hearted. Therefore, he goes around cursing people. And this is a problem, actually, in renunciation. That when these yogis do mystic yoga, their heart can become very hard. When we do any austerity, and then you become very, you get a very thick skin and a hard heart. Bhakti is the opposite. It requires a soft heart. So his heart was very hard. He couldn't tolerate that how Ambarish Maharaj could take one sip of water before he did. And Ambarish Maharaj, on the other hand, was so soft-hearted. Oh, I actually did do an offense. How did I drink some water before my guest? How is it possible? Very nice. Any other examples? Ambarish Maharaj was immediately ready to forgive him after the Lord punishes him. So this is the quality of a devotee.
Akrura.
Akrura. Oh, yes. Akrura was very cruel. Actually, his name Akrura means. So he was very hard-hearted, and he was very knowledgeable, actually. But, excuse me. The gopis were very soft-hearted, yes. There must be some means to cultivate detachment without undergoing the process of jnana yoga. So, but then how do we cultivate detachment? The process for cultivating detachment without hardening the heart is yukta vairagya. So then you say, but then how do we give up this material world? We have to, if we want to come to Krishna, right? How do we become attached to spiritual life? We can do that. We can do both things by this process of yukta vairagya. So we don't, like the yogis, give up eating, but whatever we eat, we offer to Krishna. So this is renunciation. At the same time, it doesn't harden the heart. Anasaktasya vishayan yatharham upayunjata nirbandha Krishna sambandhe yukta vairagya muchyate. Without personal attachment to sense objects, one should accept whatever can be used to please Krishna and reject anything else. So this is a very famous verse of the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Rupa Goswami focuses on this. We saw this before also. Yukta Vairagya. This is where the word Yukta Vairagya comes from. It comes from Rupa Goswami. It is Vairagya, like it is Yukta Vairagya. It is the Vairagya that connects. Yukta means connection. Yukta comes from the same root yuj as the word yoga. Yoga, Yukta, Yuktam here, which means to link or connect. So yoga is the process of linking the soul with the Supreme Soul. This is the meaning of the word yoga. This is what yoga does. Jnana yoga. It's connecting to the Lord through jnana. Dhyana yoga, connecting to Krishna through dhyana. Karma yoga, connecting to Krishna through action. Bhakti yoga, connecting to Krishna through love or devotion. So yukta vairagyam is connecting to Krishna through detachment, through renunciation. So when we renounce something for Krishna, it means that we engage it in his service. We are renouncing, but we're giving it to Krishna. That is yukta vairagya. So that is the way of renouncing and at the same moment connecting. Renouncing is the opposite of connecting. This is why this is such a dichotomy. Renunciation is opposite of attachment. But this is yukta vairagya. The renunciation itself is attachment, and the attachment is itself renunciation. Srila Prabhupada's mood and mission: one should not give up anything which can be utilized in the service of the Lord. That is a secret of devotional service. Anything that can be utilized in advancing Krishna consciousness and devotional service should be accepted. For instance, we are using many machines for the advancement of our present Krishna consciousness movement. Machines like typewriters, dictating machines, tape recorders, microphones, and airplanes. Prabhupada is so amazing, isn't he? He's saying all these machines, and it's actually all the machines for his book distribution and for his travel, you see. This is the most important thing for Srila Prabhupada, recording, typewriting, publishing, printing. This is all done through machines. But Prabhupada could use it for Krishna's service. And that was his true renunciation. Sometimes people ask us, Why are you utilizing material products if you condemn the advancement of material civilization? But actually, we do not condemn. We simply ask people to do whatever they are doing in Krishna consciousness. This is the same principle on which in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna advised Arjuna to utilize his fighting abilities in devotional service. Similarly, we are utilizing these machines for Krishna's service. Srila Rupa Goswami then recommends that one should not be attached to material sense enjoyment, but should accept everything enjoyable which is in relationship to Krishna. For example, eating is necessary, and one wants some palatable dishes to satisfy his sense of taste. So in that case, for the satisfaction of Krishna, rather than for the satisfaction of the tongue, some palatable dishes may be prepared and offered to Krishna. Then it is renunciation. Let the palatable dishes be prepared, but unless they are offered to Krishna, one should not accept them for eating. This vow of rejecting anything which is not offered to Krishna is actually renunciation. And by such renunciation, one is able to satisfy the demands of the senses. And by such renunciation, one is able to satisfy the demands of the senses. So this mouth-watering prasadam, offering plate is probably reminding you of breakfast. But this process therefore is so nice because a certain renunciation is expected of us. And if we do that, then we don't have to renounce other things. Like, we like to eat nice foods. Best is if we can give up that desire also. But the reality is most of us, we like to eat nice food. So Prabhupada is just saying that just renounce the desire or renounce the habit of eating food that is not offered to Krishna. And if you eat food that's offered to Krishna, you can eat whatever you like. He says, let the palatable dishes be made. So he's given us a test. He's not saying, he's given us a test that we can pass. But that still also requires some renunciation. Devotees, especially, you see after some time, they start going to vegan restaurants and this and that, oh, okay, it's vegetarian, it's not really prasadam, but that's okay. And we forget that actually just even eating palatable dishes is a great concession. But Prabhupada is saying, fine, we cannot come to that level of Raghunath Das Goswami, but if you can give up just food that is not just offered to Krishna, then you'll become so renounced. And it's a fact, even that is hard to do, because people want to eat here and there. We have the desire to eat at restaurants and eat outside and eat, this and that. We eat Pizza Hut, go at Pizza Hut and eat. But if a devotee just eats Krishna Prasad, naturally his senses will be controlled, because then at times you will have to fast. When the prasadam is not available, then we will have to fast. And that will gradually train our mind and our senses. In one place, Prabhupada says, if you simply make this vow that I will only eat Krishna Prasad, you will go back home, back to Godhead. So it's his promise. If we just eat Krishna Prasad, we'll go back home, back to Godhead. In Yukta Vairagya, the senses and emotions remain active. Thus the heart does not harden. So, because again, you're not giving up food, you're just only eating food that's been offered to Krishna. So the senses and emotions remain active. Therefore, the heart does not become hard. However, because these emotions and activities center exclusively on Krishna's service, they do not lead one into sense gratification. Thus, one does not fall into sense gratification. At the same time, because we're doing it only for Krishna, we don't fall into sense gratification. In this regard, I was going to mention that how in another place in the Gita, Prabhupada does write that the devotee is very callous to material things. So at the same time, while we don't harden the heart, the devotee is very callous to his own pleasure, his own senses. Just like to wake up early in the morning every day at 4 a.m., one has to be callous towards one's need for sleep and the comfort of the body. And I've seen it, the advanced devotees, they sometimes are sleeping 3 hours at night. And when they wake up in the morning, they're shaking. My Guru Maharaj's body, I would see, it would be actually shaking out of tiredness, like he could not walk. But didn't matter. They had the determination. I'm going to get up for Krishna. So in certain ways, the heart is hard. It's hard towards material enjoyment. But in the essence, it remains very soft because it's full of love. And it's soft towards Krishna. So false renunciation is when we reject something that can be used in Krishna's service. To reject something one could use to please Krishna is false renunciation, falgu vairagya. It is this type of renunciation that can harm bhakti. It can harm bhakti actually. Just like we see before Prabhupada or even during Prabhupada's time, so many preachers were not coming to America. They were not spreading this Krishna consciousness because they had renounced sitting on the plane. They had renounced the Western world, and that became a obstacle in the spreading of Krishna consciousness. But Prabhupada said, no, I will accept it so that I can spread Krishna consciousness. And these great devotees, we see that they're actually very liberal. They accept, okay, you want to serve Krishna like this, serve him like this. Of course, we cannot break the principles and then say that we'll use that in Krishna's service, because that cannot be offered to Krishna's service. We cannot say, I'll use movies or drugs in Krishna's service, because that's not service. That's opposed in principle to the practice of bhakti. But things that are just Krishna's energy can be used in Krishna's service. Now, a very interesting point that Rupa Goswami makes. So we're now changing gears, a new topic here. In India, there's a common tradition that rich people, they'll bring the Pandit and they'll say, you do 20 yagyas on our behalf. Do 10 yagyas and this and do it for us. We even see in the Shastras that, Brahmanas would do these yagyas for the king. But bhakti is different. Service executed through wealth and followers is not one's own practice of devotional service. So just because we have followers and they do devotional service, we don't automatically just get the credit. A spiritual master may train disciples to worship the deity and do other types of devotional service. This training is certainly his devotional service. However, the worship they subsequently perform is their own devotional service, not his. If he does not understand this, he may complacently assume that he is already doing so much through his followers and thus become complacent in devotional advancement. Such an amazing point. Because one says, this great person, this great devotee, through all these people, he is arranging for the practice of bhakti. He's arranged, a nice temple so devotees can do Mangalartik. He's arranged a nice, so the arrangements is their devotional service. They're inspiring thousands of people is their devotional service. They're guiding thousands of people is their devotional service. But the service of their followers is not directly their devotional service. And this is why the stalwart devotees will say they still wake up for Mangalarti. They still do 1 or 2 hours of their own deity worship. Why? They've established so many temples, worship is going on there, because they still need to do their devotional service. in addition to training others to doing it. They want to do their own. Again, my Guru Maharaj, every day he does 2 hours of deity worship, 2 hours, and he has so many responsibilities. My Guru Maharaj's name is Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj, and he's running, he's guiding 40 temples, and he's GBC in 10 zones. He has every reason not to do deity worship. He has so much management service. Why should he? But he does 2 hours without fail his own devotional service, his own deity worship. And I used to think, why? And this is the reason why. Because they take so many disciples, they take so much karma, they want to do their own devotional service to Krishna, and they know there's no replacement to it. Every day he'll be on the altar in the temple doing Mangalarti. And that is his devotional service to Krishna directly. Then after that, he comes back and he does 2 hours of his own worship to his own deities. That is his devotional service. He has about 250 Shaligram Shilas. He worships them. So they are showing by their example that just because we are preaching to others and just because our followers are doing devotional service, we cannot be complacent in our activities of devotional service. No one can become lax. That is a teaching. And when these great souls became lax, then we saw in our movement there were fall downs. The big gurus and things, when they fell down, is because they stopped going for Mangalartik. Actually, my Guru Maharaj commented that after one of these people fell down who had many, many disciples and was a great sannyasi, he said that actually for many years we never saw him for Mangalartik. We never saw him in the morning. He was not there for Mangalarti. He was not chanting his rounds, and he fell down. So people who have done a lot more service than any of us, they have fallen because they gave up their own personal spiritual practices. And this is why actually Bhakti Shastra is so valuable, and this is why reading regularly, reading and hearing these instructions in the Nectar devotion is so important, because we forget about it. We forget this. Like I've done Bhakti Shastri before, but this point was not present in my mind until today, until giving this class. It was a reminder. When I read it, it was like, oh, it's a reminder. No matter what, we have to do our own, sadhana. Otherwise, we'll fall. And in the Nectar of Instruction, Prabhupada says, great devotees in this movement have fallen down because they failed to chant their rounds. So their disciples are chanting, but their chanting is not the Guru's chanting. The Guru must still chant their rounds. Or they do, right, naturally. Similarly, a wealthy person may give a large donation to fund a huge temple or Krishna conscious project. That devotion itself is his devotional service. That donation itself is his devotional service. The service subsequently carried out therein is not his sadhana. Yeah, but the service that happens in the temple is not his service. It is the sadhana of those devotees who actually executed the services. Without understanding this, one can become complacent. It's a very amazing point, very nice points. Please imbibe these points. Please take them in your heart and internalize them. Saintly qualities. Are saintly qualities part of the practices of bhakti? What about the cultivation of saintly qualities like ahimsa, brahmacharya, satyam? Is this also a part of sadhana bhakti? Krishna says in the Gita that one who is kind, truthful, humble, and has all these qualities is very dear to me. So this must be part of sadhana. Although they may put one in a more advantageous position for appreciating God, such saintly qualities do not directly cause remembrance of Krishna. Therefore, they are not practices of pure devotional service or sadhana bhakti. I mean, isn't Rupa Goswami so amazing? Like this chapter, he easily could have skipped, but he didn't skip it. Because when you want to show the path, you show what it is. but you also tell what it is not. And in this chapter, he's telling us this is what sadhana bhakti is not. Sadhana bhakti is not just developing saintly qualities. That is very nice. And if we do devotional service along with these saintly qualities, Krishna says in the Gita, such a devotee is very dear to him. So it makes us more dear to Krishna. But by itself, it is not bhakti. That's why sometimes, just yesterday again in the program, someone is saying, there's so many people who are so kind and so nice, but they do not chant. So this person was asking, then why do they need to chant? Or even if they don't chant, can they be very advanced souls? And the answer is unfortunately no. They have those saintly qualities, but the mode of goodness is still in the material world. Eventually, we will become entangled, and we are still entangled. The mode of transcendence is beyond the mode of goodness. Saintly qualities automatically arise in a devotee. Again, but the devotee has saintly qualities, so what about that? But that is a result of bhakti. Saintly qualities do not automatically generate love for Krishna, but love for Krishna does generate saintly qualities. But love for Krishna does generate saintly qualities. For example, vegetarians are automatically devotees. For example, vegetarians are not automatically devotees, but devotees are automatically vegetarians. So these saintly qualities won't bring about love for Krishna by themselves, but a devotee automatically practices ahimsa because he's a devotee, and therefore he will not eat meat. And this is why, we have this book, Higher Taste. It's a very nice book. We have so many cookbooks in our Krishna consciousness movement. And this book, Higher Taste, sometimes devotees are distributing it on the street. And quite honestly, it's good, but it's not the best. Because vegetarianism by itself is not pure devotional service. And someone will become a vegetarian, but if that book does not describe or glorify Krishna, then they'll become a cow. Cows are also vegetarians, but they won't become a lover of Krishna. But if we give them the Bhagavad Gita or the Nectar of Instruction, then they will get love for Krishna, and automatically they'll become vegetarians. So it's a nice book if someone is actually, interested only in vegetarianism, then they get it and then they will accept it. And, for certain situations, it's a good book, but not for mass distribution. Because Prabhupada wrote, these literatures for mass distribution. He didn't write the cookbooks, but he wanted the cookbooks for the propagation, for the advancement of the movement. And it can also be a nice bridge book, but it should be a second book, like, here's the Gita and the Higher Taste. We should not distribute Higher Taste just separately. The hunter turned devotee is a Shastric example of saintly qualities automatically developing in a devotee. So Magrari was a wicked hunter, and he half killed animals just for fun. He would let their little bodies die. He would let their bodies lie in the forest to slowly die. He would shoot an arrow to them in such a way that it wouldn't kill them completely, but would half kill them. That's how hard-hearted he was. And he would obviously eat their meat also after that. So Narad Muni, when he met him, he made Magrari into a pure devotee of the Lord, and then automatically Magrari gave up his bad habits. Automatically gave up his bad habits. So much so that he couldn't then, after being a devotee, he couldn't even tolerate stepping on ants. He felt that the ants will feel so much pain if I step on them. Now imagine if Narad Muni had made him into a vegetarian. Well, he would have made him into a vegetarian, but Magrari would still not have felt bad to step on the ants. So real non-violence, real saintly qualities come on the account of becoming a devotee, which makes our heart very soft. It makes our heart full of love for Krishna, and automatically we get these saintly qualities. There are 9 types of devotional practice and their archetypes. So now Rupa Goswami goes into the 9 basic types of devotional practices. The 64 ways to practice pure devotional service are expansions from the 9 basic types of devotional service. So I used to wonder, actually, how do these 9 items fit in with Rupa Goswami's framework of bhakti? And here's the answer. Those 9 are expanded into 64. So in other words, these 64 are ways of doing the 9 processes of devotional service, which begin with Shravanam and Kirtanam, described by Prahlad Maharaj in the Bhagavatam. Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Pada Sevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakhyam Atmani Vedanam. So everything in Gaudiya Vaishnavism is based on the Bhagavatam. So you say, well, how is this 64 items based on Bhagavatam? Because it's coming from the 9 items. And those 9 items, Rupa Goswami is just expanding into 64. One can achieve ecstatic love by executing all 9 practices or by just one. One can achieve ecstatic love, Prabhupada is saying, meaning Bhava Bhakti, up to Prema Bhakti, just by one practice. What to speak of all 9? So these are the 9 practices of bhakti mentioned in the Bhagavatam, and Rupa Goswami mentions the devotees who exemplify each one of these practices, who took one of them and took it to perfection, and then they are who they are. So Maharaj Parikshit becomes the most glorious devotee of the Lord simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam non-stop for 7 days and 7 nights. So he showed that just by hearing, one can become liberated 100%, and just by hearing Bhagavatam, which is what he did, and therefore he exemplifies the process of Shravanam and Kirtanam. He did nothing else other than hear, and he went back home, back to Godhead. Next one is chanting. Who was speaking is Shukadev Goswami. He was speaking. He is chanting. The third one is remembering, which is Prahlad Maharaj. Remembering the Lord. He was always remembering, even when he was thrown in this boiling pot of oil, he was remembering the Lord, and therefore he was invincible. Therefore, he was a pure devotee of the Lord. Smaranam. Vandanam, which is Akrura. Akrura offers very beautiful prayers to Krishna, and then he sees the Lord. He sees Vaikuntha, Krishna reveals it to him. Worshipping the Lord's lotus feet. Dasyam. Lakshmi Devi. She's massaging the Lord's lotus feet. His lotus feet are her life and soul for eternity. Deity worship is Prithu Maharaj. Archanam. Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam. Vandanam, Pada Sevanam. Worshipping lotus feet was Pada Sevanam. Archanam, and then Dasyam. The real servant is Hanuman. Hanumanji ki jai. Right? So the other monkeys were doing service, immense, complete service, but no one served like Hanuman. His intensity to serve the Lord was so strong that he had to carry a mountain for the Lord. Based on the intensity of our desire to serve, our service increases, or the effect of our service becomes more and more manifest. So he had such an intense meditation on serving Lord Ram, therefore is Hanuman. There's one devotee in Delhi who, during the marathon, all year long, but especially during the marathon, he distributes like 50, 60,000 Gitas. So everyone is distributing books. It's a big competition. But he does 50, 60,000. And how does he do it? He's over time developed connections with big corporations in India. And he goes to these, he connects with the owners of these big companies, and he has them buy a Gita for each one of their employees. So, someone, has 10,000 employees, they buy 10,000 Gitas. Someone has a hotel with 50,000, not 50, maybe 5,000 rooms. They'll get 5,000 Gitas. So he does like mass book distribution that always puts the temple and the devotee group on top. And, in 1 year, he'll do like 100,000 Gitas. And so when he got initiated, he started doing this even before initiation. Then his initiated name was Hanuman Das. Why? because everyone is, distributing books there, preaching, but he was the leader. He was doing it in a Herculean way, in a way that was very pleasing to Prabhupada, Krishna, the devotees, and therefore his name became Hanuman Das. So that is service attitude, to go to any length, to use our complete meditation, imagination capacity to some or the other serve the Lord. And then we become perfect through that friendship. No friend closer to Krishna other than Arjuna. Perfect friend, complete surrender, Bali Maharaj. My Lord, please put your feet on my head. And that, in that way, he even defeated the Lord. He fulfilled his promise, and he completely surrendered unto the Lord. And the example of a person who performs all 9 processes is Maharaj Ambarish. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo, that verse. Savai Mana Krishna, his whole mind was absorbed in Krishna. He was hearing about Krishna, chanting about Krishna. He was embracing the bodies of the devotees, and in this way engaging touch in the service of the Lord. And that is Maharaj Ambarish. So this is the end of the Vaidhi Sadhana section. This is very beautiful, a very important chapter. And all of you have made it. Now you will become spontaneous devotees. And next section is Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti. That's the next chapter. And next week, we will go to chapter 15. So thank you very much, everyone, for your very kind attention. This is, this is real nectar. Nectar devotion is the best part of Bhakti Shastri. So please read the chapters. I posted the homework for all the remaining chapters on the group. Please do the homework. Don't forget to do that. And if you have any questions, please message me. Or if you have trouble getting the homework, please let me know. Okay, so I'll stop at this point. Today, I won't take questions because I actually have to leave. I have another session that started 5 minutes ago that I need to attend. So I'll stop here. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Krishna Prabhuji. Thank you so much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Thank you.
Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you.